Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Brandon Rice. Brandon is the Chief Product Officer at Weave. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, JP. Happy to be here.
So Brandon, let's start with yourself, please. Could you give us an overview of your background in technology, from where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, and how you got to where you are today as the Chief Product Officer for Weave?
I think the most natural place for me to start is grad school. I came out to California. I live in San Francisco right now, initially to go to grad school for bioinformatics to pursue my PhD. About halfway through my program there, realized that I didn't want to go the academic route and wanted to do something more immediate and tangible. I guess kind of a classic entrepreneur story. Dropped out, left the program, started a company. There was some technology that we were working on in the lab, and my PI and I started a company that was my very first startup. It was my first foray into business, and that company was called Dovetail Genomics. I was the CEO there, started it, ran it, grew it over the course of about 5 years. I would say it's an unqualified scientific success. We had a service for doing genome assembly, which is an esoteric thing, but we did a lot of them. And our customers were very happy. After 5 years, I felt like we had done all of the things that were there to do in terms of challenges. And so I set out looking for new and different challenges, ideally with more of an immediate impact on human health. I left Dovetail after that time, came up to San Francisco, and joined a first startup, which was called Freenome, building early cancer detection diagnostics using machine learning and AI at the time when it was starting to get exciting again after one of those initial troughs of disillusionment. That was a very challenging technical problem and regulatory problem, getting a diagnostic to market. That was the first place where I started getting into product properly, which is where I've spent the rest of my career since. At Dovetail, I did everything. As a founder, that's how it often goes. And I knew when I left that I was going to have to focus somehow, somewhere. I had no idea what that focus would be when I left and joined Freenome, but it was at Freenome that I figured out that product was the thing that I wanted to do, because that was where the impact lived. That was where you figure out what is it that the market actually needs, what's going to be a meaningful problem to solve, and then help the internal team get around to building something that solves it. I spent a couple of years at Freenome, went from there to a company called Synthigo, also an exciting biotech Bay Area startup in the heyday of CRISPR. And Synthigo was building products and services built around CRISPR. They sold guides as reagents. They also had services for doing screening for target discovery and things like that for drug companies, and that's where I focused. And so I was working on establishing screening services there. Went from there to a company called Resilience, which is where I was most recently before Weave. Resilience is a tech-forward contract drug manufacturer. There I really cut my teeth on the manufacturing side of drug development, did a couple years there, and then really got a hankering to get back to software and tech properly. And at the time, I was becoming exciting again with the LLMs. And I had the good fortune at that time to meet Ari, who was the CEO and one of the founders of Weave. And that's how I ended up here.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's important to showcase your experience as an entrepreneur and the various industries that you've worked in, which has now led you to your role at Weave. So moving on to Weave, tell us all about Weave, who you are, what you do, mission of the business, and then give us some insight into your role as the Chief Product Officer.
Weave, the company, is a young company. We're seed stage. I started the company back in 2022. And things really kicked into higher gear around the beginning of 2023. That's when we started the product development. We weren't exactly sure what we wanted to go after. There's a lot of possibilities, especially with LLMs in bio. And those were our two constraints. All of us had bio backgrounds and had worked in health or in drug development or life sciences in some way. And we knew that we wanted to do something with LLMs. And so that was the space we were exploring. Drug discovery is certainly a very hot and interesting area when it comes to AI, but extremely crowded. And we knew we didn't want to be a drug company. We wanted to build products and look for something that wasn't so saturated. We cast about looking for things that would have a meaningful impact on drug development, but that weren't especially sexy. We wanted to find things that were unsexy because we knew fewer people would be going after them and there'd be more opportunity to have an outsized impact. And that's how we got on to what we eventually came to pursue, which is regulatory in drug development. What we're doing at Weave is we're building a software platform, and the first product on it is called AutoIND that automates and accelerates the preparation of regulatory filings for drug development.
Thank you. Super helpful. For those listening who are in the life sciences space, all of this will make a whole lot of sense. But for those listening who are maybe not as familiar, I think the best way to demonstrate the problem that you're solving and the space that you're tackling is just the sort of the before and after. Can you define how labor intense and how difficult the regulatory side of drug development, the clinical trials, has historically been, and where Weave is coming in to disrupt and improve it utilizing AI? Help us visualize what that journey is like.
Absolutely. It's pretty wild, to be honest, because drug development is a very polarized process. On the one hand, especially on the drug discovery side, the science, the sort of data that people are able to create now is breathtakingly sci-fi, futuristic. The DNA sequencing and gene editing with CRISPR and all of these things, the science side and the technology that's being employed there is just out of this world. Meanwhile, on the regulatory side, it is almost as old-fashioned as it could be. It's not typewriters, but it's not far. People write and prepare these regulatory filings manually. It's a lot of Word documents flying around over SharePoint and email, and people writing summaries of summaries. So that's a bit of what that world looks like. Now, we're very focused on initial INDs. An IND is an investigational new drug application. This is an application that a drug maker has to submit to the FDA in order to get a blessing to go to clinical trials. Every drug maker has to do it. There's no way to get into trials without doing it. And what the drug makers are doing there is they're describing to the FDA all of the research that they've done to that point, their toxicity studies in animals, their pharmacology studies in cell lines, how they're going to manufacture the drug, how they're going to test it. It's effectively everything that is known about the drug at that point. And you're putting that all into a relatively tidy package for the FDA. And so the way that works is people write it down. You go to your lab notebook and you gather the information, you write a report. That report is then summarized and summarized. The IND is a pyramid of summaries, is the best way to think about it. Much of it is narrative. A lot of it is also tables, just building tables that summarize the studies that were done, key parameters of those studies, and so forth. That's a lot of scientist time at the computer typing things out. In the very best case, doing this manually, all your studies have been done, all the information is ready. All you need to do is just write the application. That's about 3 months. If you know what you're doing and you're on top of your game, 3 months. If you don't, it can be years because you didn't realize you needed X, Y, or Z. Now you got to go back and get it and then get to the writing again. So 3 months to up to years. If you're hiring a consultant to help get a sense of the economic cost here, and many people do hire consultants, that's going to run you bare minimum 100 grand. That can be up into $500,000 just to put the application together. So that's the before picture. And what we're doing, we're very focused on acceleration and relieving the scientists of the efforts required to pull these applications together so that they can focus instead on the science, the strategy, the higher order things. With AutoIND, the way it works is our users upload their source documents, which are study reports coming out of their LIMS systems, the systems that are where they keep their lab notebooks. They're coming from the companies that they hired to do the toxicology experiments for them. So they upload these reports, press a button, and then they get an initial draft of one of the many documents entailed in an IND, and then they can edit the document both manually using AI, and we're also applying AI to various parts of the process, including review, because many people in the company need to have eyes on these documents, and then QC and verification. You do not want to make a mistake, an error in these documents that you're going to be submitting to the FDA, because that can slow everything down. So it's very important that the quality of the content coming out the other end is pristine. And so we are applying AI to each one of those parts of the process. And the end result is that 3 months time is, for our very first customer, in the kind of crude version of our product, we were able to cut that down by 2/3. And as we're going forward, we're getting down to now to half the time, 6 weeks instead of 3 months in the very best case. We're continually bringing that in. Just the first draft, that's the most dramatic part. That is a month. If you're working with a consultant, that is literally minutes, under an hour with AutoIND to get that first draft. So that is the nature of the change we're bringing here.
It's incredible. And to put that into context, the impact that saving can have, it means new clinical trials can move quicker, new experimental drugs can get to market quicker, and it also saves millions in the cost of running clinical trials. So that's the product. Switching gears slightly then, your role, obviously chief product officer, you're overseeing the entire operation from product control, but a big part of that is interacting with the various teams, both on the engineering side, because a lot of this is going to be around NLP, natural language processing, and the auto side under the AI banner. Can you give us some insight into what that entails? What's your job like day to day? What's the typical project life cycle look like? How are you interacting with the different groups that work across Weave?
The way we work is pretty typical for a modern product development company. We do small projects with small teams and try to do a number of them at a time. So our typical project is 6 weeks. That's what we try to target in terms of scope. And that is developing some new major feature of the platform. Any given team working on one of those projects is comprised of a product manager, a designer, and a handful of engineers. And some of those engineers could be front end, back end, AI. The exact mix depends on the nature of the project and what's needed. Those are the units of team and project that we work on, and that's how we've arranged our roadmap, and that's how we work together. In terms of my job and the PM's jobs, it's 50-50 internal, external. The value that we are bringing to the company is making sure that we're not just building things that seem like good ideas or are technically challenging or impressive, but matter. And they make a difference for our customers, which then makes a difference for the business and allows the business to grow and move forward. So that's ultimately the value that we're trying to bring. And so to do that successfully, it starts with the market and the customers and getting out there, being part of the sales process, talking to prospects and customers and would-be customers and understanding them, their process, their workflow, what's easy, what's hard, where they wish that they had help, and then translating that understanding into the product. Here's things that we could build in the product that would solve problem X, Y, or Z for ideally a large segment of the market. And then that it becomes the roadmap. Once it's on the roadmap, that's when the internal part begins, and that's the other half. And that is working hand in hand with those internal teams, primarily the engineers and the designers, to realize the solution to the problem that was identified. And that's never as straightforward as it seems at first or as it sounds. There's lots of stuff that you discover and learn along the way. And that's a critical part of the whole process, learning together. It's very much a living, dynamic process. It's not as though a PM throws a project over and says, here's what we need to build, then it gets built and everybody's happy. Invariably, you find something out in week one and then you have to adjust your plans, maybe the scope, maybe the timing, maybe the exact nature of the solution. And then you're doing that continually throughout the project. So super collaborative with the engineers who are actually on the ground, putting the code down, That is what the kind of delivery part of it looks like, just working with the engineers to solve problems, figure out how to adjust scope or timing of things to make it work within the time allotted, and just at the end of the day, ensure that it's solving the problem it's intended to solve.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
Brandon, earlier on, you gave some really clear examples of recent customer wins with the time saved using AutoIND. And that's just in the earliest versions of what you've built. When you look at the roadmap ahead, particularly the next 1 to 2 years, what are you excited about? Where are you guys trying to get to from a customer growth standpoint, from a submission reduction, time save? What are some of the high level things that you and the team are working towards over the next 1 to 2 years?
That's a great question. So far, we've been very focused on the initial application that you have to file to get into clinical trials. This year, we're beginning to tackle the later phases of the regulatory life cycle of the drug. After you're in the clinic and you're submitting annual reports every year to FDA to let them know how things are going, you're amending the manufacturing plan that you had submitted to them because you have to make drug at a larger scale. You're changing your clinical protocol because of the realities of enrollment or something like this. So things are constantly changing, and you have to be keeping the FDA up to date as those changes are happening. Every single one of those is a regulatory submission. Every single one of them goes through a similar formal process as you do with the IND. And so we want to save time on all of those as well and save costs. And so we're moving on from the IND to the clinical phase filings. And then where that's ultimately going to culminate, maybe this year, maybe next, is in the final application that drug companies submit to the FDA, which is a NDA or BLA. Once you've completed your phase 3 trials and you're ready to take your drug to market, you believe you've proved that it's efficacious and safe, then you prepare a second major application after the IND and you submit that to the FDA. They say yes or no, and then you're off to the market, ideally, if they say yes. So that is the full span of the regulatory life cycle. We want to cover all of that. We'll see how far we get this year. We're certainly moving on to the clinical phase of things. So that's our plans. As a VC-backed company, it's all about commercial traction and growth and raising money to fuel that. That's what enables us to have the kind of impact we're trying to have, which is to dramatically speed up the pace at which these drugs can get onto the market and help patients, while at the same time decreasing the costs so that we can get more drugs onto the market for different indications. That is a large undertaking and requires significant resources. Much like the drugs themselves, what unlocks each subsequent phase of fundraising is some demonstration of traction or validation. For us, that's sales and bookings, and that's where we're very focused right now, continuing to get some of our earliest customers onto the product and the platform, learn from them so we can evolve the product, build it further, and make it more useful and valuable, and continue to grow the business. We're very focused this year on getting those bookings, getting to the next fundraising milestone, and getting the team together that we need to do that.
I'm glad you laid it out in that way with various pillars of importance. I want to spend a little time talking about the team. You're part of the executive leadership team and shape the culture and strategy. With the road ahead, you're going to need to strategically add people as demand increases. The more clients you sign up, the more you'll need to build out the platform. When you're looking at the potential headcount roadmap, where do you see the need to strengthen over the course of the year? What opportunities do you see for people who are listening and interested in what you're building out?
Yeah, so I think there's two areas that we'll be looking at. The obvious one is we're building software. We need engineers. We've been very thoughtful and careful in pulling our team together to this point. And we're at a place right now where until we get to that next fundraising milestone, we have the team that we need. Once we get to that point and have a higher degree of confidence in our product market fit, then we want to expand and scale and capitalize on the opportunity that we found, and that's going to require further growing product teams, which is engineering, product, and design. It's a recipe in tech companies for how you
Yeah.
approach that. The one that's less obvious points to a whole world of new types of opportunities that are going to be popping up. I think is very interesting. I don't know what bucket you might put it in. I'll put it in customer success. You have a software product that incorporates AI, but becoming proficient with the software that is using AI is not trivial. LLMs, prompt engineering is the foremost example. Anyone can write a prompt. Everyone's used ChatGPT and tried that, convincing the LLM to give you the kind of output that you're looking for. It can be an art. It's one of these half art, half science things. Understanding how the technology works is extremely beneficial in figuring out how to do that. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to do experimentation. You're going to have to try things, see what works, see what doesn't, build up your own recipe book. And that's a lot of what we've been doing at Weave, is just like figuring out how do you get the LLM to do these things. And we've ended up in a place where our product is heavily based around templates, which are customizable by our customers. Now, those templates are kind of instruction books for the AI, and they require that art science mix to put together effectively. To make this concrete, we are hiring people who can help our customers with their templates, help them figure out, okay, you're working on a gene therapy. It's some new, special, unique modality, and you have idiosyncratic needs for your regulatory filing. You need a template that is customized to your need. Putting that together, building that template requires a level of understanding of both the science, your specific drug, the regulatory expectations and needs, and the L. Getting an ability to work in each of those domains together in one person is very difficult, but extremely valuable.
Final question from me, Brandon. Whenever you're speaking to candidates about Weave, particularly individuals who you feel can add value and are the right fit, both from a technology background, but also culture and mindset, what is it that you tell them about Weave, the mission, the environment, that gets them excited enough to join you guys over some of the other great companies also trying to hire in this space?
Well, it's two things. They both have the benefit of kind of cutting both ways, because we don't want to hire just anybody. We want to hire people who are going to be aligned with the team and culture that we have and the mission that we're on. This is a mission-oriented company that is trying to have a positive impact on human health. We're working in a regulated domain. We're trying to help bring drugs to market. It's hard, super hard. It's B2B times 10, but there's a huge potential to have meaningful impact on people. That's something that attracts people to us, and it's something that we look for in the people that we hire, is not someone who wants to necessarily make as much money as possible, play with cool new technology. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those, but that's just not what we're doing. Folks who really want to build something that's going to have a positive impact on people. So that's the first and the most important thing. The other thing, I guess, is embedded in that, but I'll emphasize it because I think it's so important and it's so common, especially when it comes to the technical team. Really looking for people who are product-minded, business-minded, customer-minded, not folks who just want to play with the latest and greatest technology, make little prototypes in a sandbox, or do something that is technically impressive but no customer cares about. We really look for people who are dead set on delivering something to a customer that they're going to use, that is going to have a meaningful impact on their work. So those are the two critical aspects that we look for in the candidates and that I believe are attractive to us for the folks that we end up with.
Brandon, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. It was great to learn about your background, great insight into your own career journey, but most importantly, a great look behind the scenes of what you're building. It's a fascinating space, which, as you mentioned, is ripe for disruption. It sounds like you guys are already making significant inroads into drastically reducing the time it takes for submissions. Given the size of the market you're operating in, there's huge potential here. We wish you, the team, and everyone at Weave the very best in the months and years to come. we look forward to having you back on the show again in the near future.
Thanks a bunch, JP. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.